Uniting America with truth, justice, and independence. This is the Norman Goldman Show.
Nathan in Montana, you get us started today. Hi, Nathan.
Hey.
Thank you for being with us in Montana. How did you find us?
I'm actually driving back from Colorado, and I just happened to go to the AM stations, and I heard you talking, and I said, this guy sounds like worth listening to.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you very, very much. You can hear us on the Internet. We have our own apps for iPhones and iPads. We have our own apps for the Android smartphones. We stream live on Facebook. You can podcast. There's lots of ways to get us, Nathan, even if you're not hearing us on a radio station. But I'm glad you picked us up out of Denver on AM 760. So I understand you just got back from Afghanistan. Is that it?
Yeah, I just recently got back from Afghanistan, and I'm going through some rehabilitation in Fort Carson, Colorado, for injuries sustained over there. And I was actually in Tirna, where those two officers were killed.
What's it like in Tirna? I mean, is it a hot spot? Is it unusual that those two officers were killed there?
Yeah, it is a little unusual. So here's a brief breakdown of Tirna. It's currently being leased by the U.S. government from a local Taliban leader or a local Taliban friendly. So we're leasing the property from them, paying them lots of money, so they generally don't attack Tirna much unless it's like an accident. So it's kind of set up in the mountains a little bit. It's about 7,000 feet above sea level. It's slowly being scaled down and torn down and moved out. So they're closing it down.
Is it unusual for a lieutenant colonel and a major to die in an attack? I mean, just anywhere? I mean, aren't they usually back from the front lines? Or are there just no front lines anymore?
Well, generally speaking, and yes, there isn't really much of a front line. I would say that they're probably either advising staff or they could have been pilots. It could be either one of those two things. A lot of people would say that there's no front lines and that they probably would have had those guys in the rear. But with the closing down of Tirna, they could have been anything. They could have been like the last group of people there. They could have been any part of the logistic operations was pulling everything out of there. Could have been anything. So.
All right, let me,
Nathan,
I'm really, really glad you called because I got a lot of questions for you. Let me start with this. How many deployments have you done to Afghanistan?
2 to Afghanistan.
How many to Iraq?
2.
Gee whiz. And are you suffering any PTSD that you can tell?
Total of 6 deployments in the last 13 years in the military, 7 years in the Marine Corps, and last couple of years in the National Guard. I deal with PTSD every day.
To your knowledge, have you killed anybody?
Well, I was in the Marine Corps for 7 years, and we're pretty much known for going in places and doing unfriendly things.
All right, so does that kind of haunt you? I mean, you've killed people, I take it, and you know that you've killed people.
Yes and no. I look at it with a little bit different view anymore. Most of the times whenever we were in engagements, it was usually us versus them. At some point, you look at it, and the guys to your left and your right, you care more about them than you care about this other guy that's shooting at you. So,
I've heard that about the military, that really you're not fighting for God and country. You're fighting for your squad, your unit, the guys to the left and to the right, and that's really what it boils down to.
Yeah, we don't really make much decisions at the lower end of the totem pole. We usually just cover each other's butts.
Well, let me ask you this about the leasing. You said something about leasing from the Taliban. Am I to understand that our tax dollars, yours and mine, are going to the Taliban to keep them quiet, or to let them, to not have them attack us, or to lease us land and to just buy their quiet?
Indirectly. So it works like this. Let's say I'm a farmer in the United States, and I have all this property, and some company wants to put windmills on there. Well, they come over to me and they say, hey, look, we'll put these windmills over here and pay you some money. You just let us put the windmills here. Farmer says, okay, that sounds good. well, we don't regulate or care what the farmer goes to do with that money. And then that farmer says, hey, I'm going to go protest against clean energy with the money that we're paying him to put windmills on his farm. So it's kind of the same situation over there. Guy has a big bunch of property and says, you know, America, hey, you want to borrow this property. It used to be actually a Russian strong point when the Russians were there.
Yeah.
There's even still remnants of the fort that used to be there. But this guy that owns the property says, hey, you know, America, this is a good strategic location for you, and you know, I'll let you lease my land for X amount of money. America says, oh, okay, it sounds good. And once we give him the money, we don't really regulate where it goes to. Now, just because he's a guy in Afghanistan doesn't mean he's part of the Taliban or has anything to do with the Taliban.
Right.
However, you know...
But you know who they are.
Oh, we know who they are, yeah. Oh, definitely. We know who the Taliban are. We know where they are. We know what they're doing. If you think that the United States with its NSA is doing some, you know, pretty sketchy stuff with watching our phone calls, I mean, we've got eyes in the skies. We have blimps at every place over there. We've got more eyes on people in Afghanistan than you have here in the United States. So by far, the United States and the NSA thing, that's nothing. They're able to do so much more.
Well, if you've got details, I'm willing to listen.
Well, I don't know. What do you want to know as far as what they're able to see? Or
are we? Well, I understand from what our government is telling us, we are trying to entice the Taliban into peace talks in Afghanistan. Now, I gather that means that we have to be nice to them, and so we are like allowing the Taliban free reign in lots of parts of Afghanistan to impose their Sharia law and all the other things that they want to do. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, pretty much.
Okay, so is it? What about the Karzai government? How do the U.S. troops there and the U.S. military there regard the Karzai government? When I think of the Karzai government, I think of them as corrupt.
Oh, yeah, very, very much. So it's kind of like D.C. It's a very similar thing to what we have in the United States. In Afghanistan, you have Kabul and the government that you see. What people don't see is the localized governments, which are so detached from Kabul and the Karzai government that they really don't have anything to do with it. Karzai and all of the stuff that you see on TV is so minute as far as what's going on over there. It's almost like a smokescreen.
He's like the mayor of Kabul, basically. What's happening out in the hinterland has nothing to do with the central government.
Right.
Okay, so the nation, such as it is extremely decentralized, and you just have to deal with things on a local basis because Hamid Karzai's reach just isn't very far.
Right, very much. And, you know, when you're asking for people to volunteer for local police work or for the Afghan army over there, you're pretty much saying to them, hey, look, we know you don't have anything else to do. Come do this. So they do. There's not really, you know, they've gotten a lot better with vetting the guys and actually finding out who they are and their histories and everything else. But it's kind of hard when their technology over there and the tracking of people, they really don't know Jim from, you know, John. They have no idea.
Well,
So,
I know all the green on blue attacks have really kind of spooked the military, right? We train them, give them guns, and they immediately turn around and start shooting you guys, right? So that's caused a lot of problems, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's a real big gray area as far as that goes because we do a lot of training with them, and as far as the incidences that happen, there's so many more that don't happen. There's so many days that go by and so many actual Afghan police and Afghan army that go out and actually get the Taliban that it kind of almost pairs and, you know, it's small. It's really small, minute thing. Yeah, it happens, and yes, there's green on blue and even blue on green, but there's so many more operations that go down without a hitch than they ever tell you about. The news is more concerned with telling you about all the failures and all the bad stuff that goes on.
Sure.
I mean, I've seen and witnessed over there, you know, actual Afghan army going out and conducting their own operations that we taught them how to do and taking down Taliban strongholds.
Well, Nathan, I've got to ask you this. I mean, because you led me right into it, and I wanted to ask you, and I'm so glad you called in. I'm so glad you found us. You're giving us a perspective that we just don't get from the corporate media here. I mean, will the nation survive when we leave, or will the Taliban just take over? Will the Karzai government, such as it is, crumble? I mean, is there a chance that the place will be stable?
Oh, there's a very good chance it'll be stable. The big part is you've got a generation coming up now in Afghanistan, a younger generation that's seen the Western culture, and you've got a generation that's tired of fighting, but they're willing to fight to not fight, if that makes any sense.
It does.
They're willing to fight so that they can be left alone. A lot of the people that are joining the Afghan army and the local police force over there, they're joining. They're 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 21-year-old guys that are joining because they don't want to be part of the Taliban. They don't want to get shot at anymore. They don't want us there, but they also don't want the Taliban there. There's a very good chance that it's going to stand up and succeed on its own. The problem here is it goes back to just like what you were talking about with Syria. So if we give Syria arms, just like we did the Taliban back when Russia was occupying the area, and we give Syrian arms and all this assistance and training, was to say that they're not going to turn into what the Taliban turned into in Afghanistan. So now you've got the Taliban and a lot of the leaders getting a lot of funding, no longer from us, but from other sources. Just like their neighbors in Pakistan, a lot of the problems with IEDs over there, they don't manufacture a lot of IEDs in Afghanistan, really. They manufacture explosives, but they don't manufacture a lot of the IEDs. They use parts and pieces of stuff that they get from other countries. So, we go over there with a remote-controlled car because I want to play around in my off time on a deployment, and then I throw it in the garbage. Well, that garbage goes outside, and then they throw it in the dump, and then some kid goes through it and takes those pieces and makes an IED and then blows somebody else up.
Wow.
So it's kind of a weird mix. There's a chance, but the problem is the Taliban are getting a lot from other places. If we cut off their supply and their stuff that they're getting, as far as assistance from Pakistan, I may or may not have said that a couple times.
Pakistan is the big problem.
Well, you look at Pakistan and they say, oh, well, we don't have anything to do with this, we don't have anything to do with this. So
Even I know to laugh at that.
Yeah, well, explain to me why Pakistan manufactures 100% plastic anti-personnel mines, but then doesn't put explosives in them and sends them across the border into Afghanistan, where Afghanistan puts explosives in them and then kills U.S. troops.
Right.
So you're telling me that the Chinese rockets that they're shooting at us that are somewhat new, the Taliban just happen to find in Afghanistan?
I get it. Nathan, I'm running out of time, but I got to ask you one more question. What about the drugs, the poppies? Are our troops, I mean, please be honest with me, are our troops protecting the fields of poppies that are made into heroin?
Yes and no. It's kind of a weird thing. The heroin, the poppy fields, there's so much more that they're used for beyond heroin. I'd look to your big pharmaceutical companies, your knockoff companies. They get a lot of the ingredients from Afghanistan and from all these other countries over there, where the labor is really cheap. So your off-wall China knockoff drugs that you see here and there, non-name brand stuff. A lot of their ingredients are coming from other countries like that. We're not really guarding the fields over there. We're just not destroying them.
And why aren't we destroying them?
Well, if it gives them some sort of an economy that they can survive off of, our justification is why hurt their economy if they're able to grow something and move on. We're actually teaching them how to grow other things. There's whole different groups of people from the military that are going over there and teaching them agriculture. We should grow things in the desert and in the rocky sand, but we're just not destroying the poppy fields. I mean, if we could teach them to do something else besides poppy and become more self-reliant, we look at that as better than, destroying their poppy fields. And
Nathan, I hear you. Well, I've got about another 100 questions I'd love to ask you, but I've got to run. Nathan, would you call me again, please, soon, and let's talk some more?
I will.
Please do, because I want to ask you how the military is treating you, whether you're dealing with the VA yet, what's the mission that's been explained to you. I mean, we've got so much. Dude, well, yeah, I mean, well, Nathan, let's talk some more, okay? Would you call in?
Will do.
I really appreciate it. Nathan, I mean, that was just awesome. I'm sorry if it went long. I gave him a whole segment, but I mean, how often do you get a guy calling in saying, hey, I just got back from Afghanistan. I've had all these deployments. Let me tell you what's really going on.
Uniting America with truth, justice, and independence. This is the Norman Goldman Show.